What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today Legrand Legacy. Before we get started, I want to let you in on a little secret to my creative process. Normally, right as I'm starting to get down to business on a big game, I like to do research on it, figuring out just some vague details, like how does the combat work, what are the characters' names, and what is the setting in general, just so that as I'm getting into the game, I'm not completely lost. But with Legrand, I actually did not do that. After seeing the initial teaser trailers, I just decided to get the game and beat it for myself, to experience it with zero bias. And I gotta say, this was such a brilliant way to have this, to get it to just sit back and enjoy it as a 40-hour roller coaster of crazy twists and turns. And so I want to try and give you the same experience. In this video, I'm going to talk about each part of it, but without spoiling a single thing, just to make sure you get to have the same good times I had if you choose to buy it. Let's begin by talking about the story. This is a world that is very, very chaotic. Legrand seems like this wondrous, far-off mystical place with magic that can cure any wound, a blacksmith that can craft legendary weapons that can smite the gods, and, well, I mean, some really cool stuff. But simultaneously, there's also some despicable evil, like arenas that literally have slaves kill each other over and over again for entertainment. It's a very smart duality, and it makes it where you realize as you go through this area that it is a land that is just as conflicted as our characters are. You see, these are people that all have a singular quest. We play as one of these slaves that's managed to escape captivity almost by pure luck, and is now trying to find his own path through life, which may just end up saving Legrand itself. It seems like there's some sort of giant civil war that's brewing on the horizon, but our people may be able to stop it. Now let's talk about the combat, because you are going to be doing a ton of that. This game is very, very fighty, so I think it's interesting to try and analyze the combat itself, because while this may be a turn-based RPG, it has a big twist to the gameplay that I think very much changes things up for the better. Let's take a look at just a random battle start to finish. So as you can see, at the beginning here, my team is dropped in, and you see each one is actually in a particular spot, which I can choose. There's separate rows, front row and back row. If I want to try and have somebody like a archer, it's probably best to put her at the back, so she can still fire arrows without being hit in the face quite as much. And if I want her to be guarded, I can actually put somebody directly in front of her. The further people are forward, the more enemies will attack them first. So obviously you want to try and put your heavy bashers and the people who can take the most damage at the forefront. Now during the course of this battle, everybody gets to go in sequence to basically how much speed they have, their agility stat. Beating people up though is a matter of choosing what magic you want to use, which is called grimoires, and then trying to analyze the correct elemental types. Everybody has a weakness. Lightning, water, fire, earth. You need to make sure that you're properly taking advantage of these weaknesses, because stuff in this game will murder the heck out of you. But there's also a lot of weird elemental types that are involved with the weapons themselves. Like if somebody has a lot of shielding, perhaps they're going to be weak against something like hammers, or if somebody is really, really good with swords, they're probably going to be weak against daggers. So you need to constantly keep an eye on what people are wielding, what their energy is, and be ready to really exploit that. By now, I'm sure you've noticed the major thing that I consider the really unique spark to this combat, which is the action wheel. Actually, I don't really know what it's called, but I've been calling it the action wheel during my playthrough. So basically, after you select what your attack is going to be, there starts to be this spinning thing, and if you manage to press the corresponding button in that little teeny tiny sliver, it will be a super attack by default. Usually it will interrupt whatever the enemy's trying to do, and of course do double damage at once, so you always want to try and get that. Now this brings me to how stats work. You are going to be doing a ton of these battles, which isn't really a problem because honestly they're super fun. But you need to worry about how you're leveling up. Every time you manage to beat that next boss or do a bunch of random battles, you get experience points, which makes you stronger. But it doesn't just randomly assign you new attribute points, instead you put them in manually. You can make it where you're purposely choosing which stats you like the most, and by putting them into certain areas, you can actually strengthen the things you think are the most essential. Like the main character, he's got some fire attacks that are basically increased by upping his intelligence, but you can also just put a bunch of talent points into his strength and say, screw magic, I just want to punch people in the face. It makes it where you can really kind of have two different avenues of gameplay. There's the people who just upgrade stats to make themselves super strong, and there's the people who try and upgrade themselves to try and be very, very diverse, to have a lot of different kinds of magic so that they can handle any situation. But this does bring me up to the thing that I actually disliked. These battles are very, very cool, but there are other things in here that are just not quite as awesome. This time, when I'm just in a dungeon and I'm able to bash some stuff, level up, get lost, that is when things are best. But this game also randomly throws out mini-games and other little styles that just don't really feel like they fit. Like these humongous turn-based battles where you're actually trying to dominate an entire battlefield piece by piece, and you're having to worry about properly flanking people, exploiting weaknesses on this, and trying to basically slowly extrapolate how to take them over. It's just something that doesn't feel like it fits the rest of the game, and seems like they probably just came up with it at the last minute to try and make it seem a little bit more diverse in its gameplay style. There's also all sorts of just weird mini games that pop up, like fishing, of course, but also things like this. This is called fencing, but it's more of like rock, paper, scissors. You just keep pressing random buttons to do a high, mid, or low attack and basically exploit that weakness. And it's just not something that's fun. It's not thrilling. It's just one of those things that feels like it probably should be optional or skippable instead of a forced activity. For a majority of the time, you are able to try and bypass some of this stuff. It seems like a lot of the really special events are connected to these side quests. Now, I'm just going to say up front, I love the way they handled side quests in this game, which is that basically, whenever you're in town, there will be people with exclamation points above their head. You can talk to them, and they'll normally ask you to do something that's very small and simple, like finding a particular character or tracking down a certain item. But the reason I love this so much is because it is always something that is perfectly in your path already. Like, if somebody just asked you for the main story to go to a big corrupted cave, normally there will be a side quest that'll let you go there as well and fight a mini boss to unlock a new weapon. I think this is a really cool aspect of making it where if you want to do the side quests, it feels so perfect. It feels so engaging. It makes it where there's this very natural added depth. With all the good stuff I'm saying here though, I do think that there's a pretty big problem when it comes to Legrand Legacy, which is that this is very clearly a tiny indie game. It has a lot of problems with it that are just something that normally happens because the studio is so tiny that they didn't manage to notice some of these glitches. Like, sometimes I'd be in a cutscene and I'd actually have a character be standing over their own subtitles. I mean, look at this. How the heck does a glitch like that happen? There are also some typos throughout the game. Pretty frequently, you'll see people speaking and there will be incorrect punctuation or letters that aren't properly capitalized. It's just something that's a little bit distracting. There's also some weird stuff like right here. You can notice that my shadow is not connected to my feet. This is a pre-rendered background, obviously, but still, shouldn't I be standing on my shadow? It creates this weird perception like me and my party is here having a serious discussion while floating about 2 feet off the ground. These are small glitches, but I have to say that they are quite distracting. Sometimes I would actually take breaks from the game, not because I was bored, but because these things were really kind of breaking my immersion. I would really just save it and come back later when my brain was a little bit more ready to handle this quirkiness. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Legrand Legacy an 8 out of 10. For this review, I specifically beat it on Nintendo Switch, and I'm saying that because I was able to play a lot of this game in handheld mode, and it functions well like that. So I just want to say that specifically for those who are interested in picking up this console port of it. But no matter where you get it, since this is so dirt cheap, you're really in for a good time. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. My voice keeps cracking in this video. Ah, well, my bad. Thanks for watching. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.